Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. And this week we are live. I'm your host, Gorgeous George, and with me as always, some of the sharpest MMA minds in the biz. Joining me this week, Matt Wells is in the house. He's in the Big D, Dallas, Texas. Goes from MMA Junkie Radio here in Sin City, as am I. Nolan King, the Boston shot caller, East Coast representing. Cold Coffees is on ones and twos. Let's get started. Okay, fellas, it's fight week, and this Saturday we have probably the sickest card of the year on paper. So this is where I want to start the SBC Live era. The top three fights at UFC 280 are all very intriguing for different reasons. The main event, Charles Oliveira versus Islam Makhachev for the vacant UFC lightweight title. That's about as high level as it gets, fellas. The co-main event, Aljamain Sterling defending his UFC bantamweight title versus TJ Dillashaw. Man, those guys trash talking, accusations of PED use. It's getting personal. And in the feature bout, top bantamweights, Peter Yan versus Sean O'Malley. This could wind up revealing a lot about O'Malley one way or another. We already know Yan is a G. Which of these three fights are you most hyped to watch? Matt, you're leading off.
For me, I'm going with the co-main event, Aljamain Sterling and TJ Dillashaw. I mean, for me, like when I think of like which fight do I want to see the most, and I mean, I guess this one is the most intriguing clash of styles because that's what, you know, MMA is supposed to be about, right? Who can implement their game more? Is it going to be TJ with his dynamic stand-up game and his awesome footwork and his quick in and out movements? Or is it going to be the champion Aljamain Sterling activating backpack mode and getting this fight to the ground? I think that's what we're going to see the most here is going to be that dynamic. Who can implement their game the most and who can do it early? I think Aljo is going to have to, you know, figure out the dynamic movement of TJ and kind of drag this out as long as he can, because I think if the fight's going to be over quickly, I think it's going to favor TJ more, because that means he got his stand-up game off quick, you know, before Aljo could kind of slow things down, bring it to the ground. So for me, that's the most intriguing fight. It's an established title already. I mean, the main event's got a vacant title, which is cool. You know, who's going to walk away with the title? But you have a champ who's already defended. You know, he came in, he showed up, he beat Peter Yan, right? So I think that's going to be the thing for me. As you mentioned, George, that bad blood as well, the
Yes.
PEDs talks. I mean, Aljo's also got a little controversy himself from some social media posts this week. So there's a lot of stuff surrounding this fight that's really intriguing to me outside of the fight just itself. But so that's my personal main event. But I mean, you can't really choose a wrong answer here.
Yeah, and it's my favorite weight class at the moment, bantamweights, man. It is getting personal. How about you, Goes? What are your thoughts here?
Well, your favorite weight class is really undergoing an unofficial Grand Prix that's been happening here before our eyes. And I'm going to stick with that theme. It's a tough decision, guys, because if you look at everything on this card, at least the top three fights, everybody's got something to prove, right? You got Oliveira. He doesn't get any respect. He's the underdog in this fight. Makhachev, he's got to live up to Khabib and even supersede him, depending on who's talking, right? Sterling and Aljamain Sterling and TJ Dillashaw are going back and forth, but it's Peter Yan and Sean O'Malley. That one's kind of got my eye. Remember, Sean Shelby was the one that had to talk everyone into this fight. When this one popped up on the schedule, didn't our jaws drop? Didn't it not kind of go with what the UFC's been trying to do with Sean O'Malley? It's a little different here, so it's got me more interested. Not a whole lot of smack talk, but hey, both guys have something to prove, right? Yan wants to prove that he's back. O'Malley, he's got to kind of convince a group of MMA fans that think he doesn't even deserve to be in this spot. He's been coddled this whole time. This is his chance to shut everyone up, and he can do it against Peter Yan because I think he took a significant jump here. This is going to be a tough fight. The fight itself, is Peter Yan going to be so aggressive? Is he going to push forward? Is it going to bother O'Malley? Is O'Malley going to have to fight going backwards? Can O'Malley use his length in this fight? I don't know, man. There's a lot of question marks in this fight. That's what got me intrigued.
And Goes, it takes place in my favorite division, the bantamweight division. I love it, man. So much going on here. Nolan King, wrap things up.
Yeah, I'm surprised that this is the third choice, but I got to go with the main event. And I know with intrigue, a lot of times it's about the unknown. Like Goes said, you know, we don't really know how good Sean O'Malley is. We don't know what to expect. Can he compete? But for me, I'm intrigued by what I do know, which is that Charles Oliveira and Islam Makhachev are two elite fighters with very different styles who we're going to get to see compete in the cage. And I feel like you talked about the bantamweight division being kind of the hot one right now. And I agree with that. I think that you can't deny the talent that's in that one. But lightweight, I feel like, is kind of in this new era as well. That's really exciting. I mean, for a while there, we had Conor McGregor kind of looming over the division, and everybody had to go through him and super fights and yada, yada. And then we had the Habib era where it was like, okay, he's just like wrecking everybody. He's making everybody's favorite fighters look bad. But now I feel like it's a little bit more open. Like we see, the last few title fights are just with Charles and Justin Gaethje, and now this, like, there's a lot of guys that I feel like you match them up and you're like, man, I don't really know who wins. So to know that division's so strong and so elite and not have somebody that's kind of looming over the whole thing, I think is fantastic. I think Charles Oliveira has turned into a straight gangster in this part of his career, walking around in Abu Dhabi with the Tiger. And then you got Islam, who's kind of carrying Habib's legacy on his shoulders and fighting the guy that Charles never got to fight. So for me, I have to say that I'm most looking forward to the main event. I think it's properly getting the shine that it deserves on a great card, great supporting acts all around. But there are no wrong answers. I mean, these three fights are freaking fantastic.
They're all awesome. And as you saw Joker Boom participating there, you can leave us a comment in the chat. We'll react to some of those. Keep them coming. We'd love to know what your favorite fight is on this fight card. Top to bottom, it is stacked. But we're going to move on to topic number 2. Oh, Goes, you got something to chime in.
Well, no, after everything we just said, I mean, honestly, guys, we talked about a lot of fighters who have something to prove. Who do you guys think has the most to prove that night?
Oh, I think it has to be Sean O'Malley, like you said. I mean, for me, like, this is for how long have people said that he sucked? How long have people doubted him? How long have people said, oh, he's just, never fought anybody good, or he talked his way into a situation? Well, guess what? Now it's the opposite argument. You've got the same people that said that and doubted him still doing the same thing, saying, oh, he's going to get killed. So shout out, regardless, those two, you can't be right on both of those arguments. Like, shout out to Sean for taking this fight. I don't think you can say he's scared anymore. I don't think that's possible. But it is time. It is time to step up and put the money where the mouth is. We'll see how that unfolds.
Yeah. How about TJ Dillashaw? Can he win a world title and shed those accusations that that will kind of follow him for the rest of his career? If he can get past Aljamain Sterling, that would be tremendous for him. I mean, there's a lot of people. Makhachev, he's yet to fight even a top 5 guy. So this would be all of it in one package, winning the title and taking out Chucky Olives, the guy that we all consider to be number 1 unofficially anyway. All right, we are going to move to topic number 2.
Let me chime in on that real quick, because I think the one guy that has the most here to prove is Petr Yan. I mean, he's the guy that's taking the fight against the guy that everybody says he shouldn't be in this matchup, right? Like, why are you fighting Sean O'Malley right now? Like, that's kind of the narrative that we see out there. And he's coming off the loss to Aljo, when in reality he fumbled the bag in the first fight against Aljo, right? And then in the rematch you lose. I mean, yeah, he went out there and beat Corey Sandhagen, but if he goes out there after that loss to Aljo and then loses to Sugar Sean, like, people are going to be like, how good is Petr Yan? Like, that's going to be the takeaway after that, right? Because I think there was a point in time when everybody was like, Petr Yan is that guy. He's the next guy that's going to reign this division for a long time. And then if he loses to Sean O'Malley now, at this point in time.
Strong point, Matt. However, you're almost reinforcing Nolan by saying, but what if he loses to Sean? And so that's the whole thing. Like, Sean O'Malley is really the one of the 6 that I guess hasn't achieved, I think, that championship status, officially or unofficially. I don't know. We'll see. They're all intriguing fights in many ways. All right, topic 2. So one more time, folks. Chucky Olives isn't defending the lightweight title on Saturday. He's competing for the vacant title. Now, the UFC does ensure, not all, but most of their main events are ensured by having a fighter ready to go in, step in, should one of the 2 combatants miss weight or fall out for whatever other issue. Sometimes they use another fighter from the same card, same weight class, Beneil Dariush, right, for example. Sometimes it's a fighter who's not booked to fight on the card that just kind of shows up. Alexander Volkanovski, anybody? To that, former UFC champ Henry Cejudo came out recently, and he said that featherweight champion Alexander Volkanovski made a mistake by agreeing to be the backup fighter for UFC 280, Charles Oliveira and Islam Makhachev, the main event. Now, unofficial, or I should say, we still haven't heard official word as to what's going to happen Both camps are chirping in, but this is what Henry Cejudo had to say. Be smart about what you do. All right. It's a longer quote now. He says, a lot of guys are going to think that I'm being a hater, but I'm going to tell you why it's a mistake for Alexander Volkanovski. Cejudo recently said in a video posted on his YouTube channel. He continues, Alexander Volkanovski, number one, you're going to get that second title shot. The UFC confirmed to you, you're the next person in line to fight the lightweight title. Why don't you just wait? Guys, does Triple C have a point? Goes, it's on you, sir.
Yeah, I think to a certain extent he does. And sometimes Triple C will go overboard. I think he'll admit that, he likes to put a little sugar on the things he says. But I think right here, he's pretty spot on. I mean, if you look at the situation and we kind of analyze it the way his camp would, wouldn't we think that if somebody were to fall off, it would more than likely be Charles Oliveira, leaving Volkanovski against Makhachev? That is a bad matchup, especially a bad matchup for someone that realistically you're not really putting 100% into a training camp for. At the highest level, moving up a weight class, I don't know that that's a great idea. And I think sometimes when people take these types of situations where they say, all right, I'll be ready just in case, really maybe they don't put 100% in. Maybe they're thinking, hey, the chances of this happening are really slim, and that's why they do it. But in this particular case, I have to take Volkanovski at his word. I think he's serious. Now, whenever a guy moves up in weight and challenges somebody, they get a little bit of a pass, right? If things don't go your way, hey, good for you. You went up, you challenged yourself. We've seen that happen before. However, I'll argue this a little bit. When Israel Adesanya went up and he got ragdoll, I feel like a little bit of the mystique went away. I think when he came back, even though it was a different division, was facing a guy that was bigger than him, I think a lot of people saw some holes here, and it's something that Israel hasn't really shed, even going back to his natural division. And I'd hate for something like that to happen to Volkanovski, especially a guy who in the future, I mean, we're talking about him pound for pound. When we do that, we have to nitpick everything, every little thing. And I would hate for him to put that on the line just to prove a point. I kind of agree with Triple C here.
He just fought in July. He's recovering from a broken bone in his hand. It's only October. He's traveling 20 hours across the world. It does seem like a force goes. Nolan, you're up next, man. What do you think?
Yeah, I see both sides of it, because on one hand, I'm saying if you were a contender, like if this was Beneil Dariush or something, it wouldn't be ideal. Like say he didn't have a fight. Say he was just there like, hey, man, we don't have an opponent for you, but we want you to be a backup fighter. Like you kind of put yourself in a pretty good position to agree to that. Like, sure, it's not ideal. You don't get a full training camp focusing on one person. Maybe you found out about this later than you would have liked. Maybe you only get 4 or 6 weeks of training camp, but you kind of put yourself in that slot where you're like, hey, the UFC put me in the on deck circle. Like, I think you have some sort of claim there to be fight the winner regardless. But for Alexander Volkanovski, I feel like he's kind of was already in that position. Like he's cleared out that division featherweight essentially. I mean, sure, there's always going to be somebody else to fight, but for me, I think that he was maybe the front runner anyway. Like I don't necessarily see this as him taking advantage of a scenario that would escape him otherwise. Like I think he's certainly the most popular option for the next title, the winner of Makhachev versus Oliveira. I think he's again, the UFC seems to be kind of okay with it. Dana's kind of indicated that that's certainly a possibility, and that's something they would look at. And looking at, no offense to Beneil, no offense to Gamrot, like I think that which is the bigger fight, right? Which is the bigger one? Gamrot stepping in.
Nolan, let me call it 20 on you. Let me call it 20 on you, and then I'll let you continue. They just announced Perth in February. Yeah. Is he risking a lot here? You call it a force, the broken hand, and in a few months, are you going to be ready to go for Perth? Because I think they want to kind of almost build around him. So is he rolling the dice too much here?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I think that for him, I wonder which is more important to him, right? Is it more important to him to get 2 titles the quickest way possible, or is it more important for him to have the Alexander Volkanovski show in February? Or does he think that, it's again, this guy knows his body and he's a world-class athlete. So I'm assuming his calculations are not just random, but at the same time, maybe there is some sort of doubt in the back of his mind that, hey, maybe the UFC will go a merit-based way where they'll say, oh, say Beneil goes out and Joaquin Buckley kicks Gamrot's head off. Like, I'd be sitting here on Spinning Backlick in 3 weeks telling you how it was BS that they weren't going with the guy that earned it. So I think there's always a possibility that something like that could happen. And maybe he just wants to erase all doubt and just continue to put himself in the best scenarios. And I mean, I believe that the backup fighters do get a nice check. So I think maybe that he views it as a low low likelihood scenario that he'll step in and get some extra cash on the side.
All right. Well, Matt, one thing's for sure. If we do go with Volkanovski, we get to see Benel Dariush versus Gamrot. So that's a great fight that I wouldn't want to have taken away from him. But man, fair is fair. He's won 7 straight. Hell, he could have been one of the 2 fighting in the main event. We'll share your thoughts.
I mean, I have to mention how much I hate the entire idea of having a backup fighter in general. These are professional athletes at the highest level of their sport. They deserve to know who they're preparing to step into fight against. Also, I don't like the idea of doing unnecessary weight cuts. And I mean, listen, that's part of the reason why we have backup fighters in general, right? Is because the weight cutting in MMA is so extreme. The day before a fight, something could happen on the scale. And so, oh my God, we got to scramble and get something, throw something together so we can still sell a card. Whereas you could fix the root of the issue by, addressing weight cutting. And then we could all just have the fights that we want every time anyways. But I mean, there's so many things that need to be fixed here to just prevent these situations from even occurring. But to Henry Cejudo's original point, I don't like the idea of him, stepping in or kind of preparing for this backup role. I would prefer Alexander Volkanovski to have a full camp, knowing who his opponent would be, because he's kind of putting himself in this position. I'm going to be here. I don't know who I would fight. Would it be the dominant grappler? Would it be the grappler in a different realm of the jiu-jitsu side in Charles Oliveira, who can also crack on the feet as well? I'm not a fan of the whole backup fight thing, man. And it just doesn't, I don't care what weight class it is. Like, even if it's a heavyweight, I mean, it's just one of those things that's so unique to MMA that is just so foreign in every other combat sport. Like, you wouldn't see Deontay Wilder sitting on the sidelines if Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua were about to fight. You don't see Deontay Wilder hanging out in the back being like, hey, something happened, I'm ready to go. Like, that's just not how it works in boxing, because one, those guys have more control over their careers in general for a lot of reasons. And 2, like, regardless of the weight class, things don't happen on the scale like they do in MMA. So, I mean, there's a lot of things going on here, but in general, not a fan.
And you know what, Matt, just to jump on that, because you said that perfectly, fighters in boxing understand their worth, right? And I think that's something that gets lost in MMA. I think people are just trying to capitalize as quickly as they can. They see the shelf life is a little bit shorter. But you, as a professional athlete, you have to respect your place on the chessboard. You are not a pawn, all right? You need to be bigger than that. And I kind of agree with Matt on that.
Man, Go's getting philosophical. I love it. And guys, we wouldn't even be in this pickle if it wasn't for that Arizona commission. So I think Henry Cejudo should just go down there and maybe take over the commission or whatever before worrying about what's going down here. Although I do value his opinion. He was a champ. He is Triple C. I'll give him that. We got to move on, though. All right. Topic 3. Alexa Grasso had an impressive win over Viviane Araujo in her first UFC headliner at UFC Fight Night 212. That's 4 wins in a row for the Mexican flyweight since she moved up from strawweight. She said afterward that she would like another headlining act before a title shot. Do you think that's the right play, fellas? Or should she challenge Valentina Shevchenko now? Moreover, do you have any concern that she's actually feeling like she's not ready for Bullet? Nolan, get the party started.
No, I don't know. I can't get inside her head, but I don't hate when a fighter says, hey, I don't want to take a jump that could be perceived as big. Like, I think a lot of times, especially with the lower tier, guys and girls that are entering the UFC, we see people that are like, first UFC fight, oh, I'm ready to be champion, all this stuff. And sure, if you can back that up like Conor McGregor and go out and do that and say, I proved everything, that's cool. I mean, it helps your brand and everything. But I think there's also an over-eagerness from a lot of fighters to be in, just want themselves to be in the big scenario without actually taking a step and looking at where they are in the division, where their skills are, who they're going to be fighting, where they can improve. So I don't hate Alexa Grasso saying that, especially where she knew there would probably be blowback where people would say, oh, why doesn't she want to fight the champion? Does she not think she's good enough? Like, I mean, it's Valentina Shevchenko. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong in saying that. Like, you asked the question, is she ready? I don't think anybody's ready. I mean, Talis Santos is probably the closest person that's ready, and she's, I think, still recovering from her eye injury. So for me, I'm not like jumping at the idea for Alexa Grasso to fight Valentina next, especially where she's not jumping at the idea. But I think that's also kind of the nature of that division, right? Like, it's Valentina Shevchenko, it's everybody else. And then you got, I guess, Talis Santos, she did the best. So she's maybe a half a step up from everybody else. And outside of that rematch or the Amanda Nunes fight, I think we're going to run into a scenario where on paper, it's going to look like a reach.
All right, Matt, you're next. And bear in mind, man, Mexico versus Brazil, it's big, especially in soccer. Imagine these MMA matches, if we can get a few of them. You've seen Brandon Moreno and Davison Figueiredo. They've delivered.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think the most important thing that Alexa Grasso has going for her right now is that she hasn't fought Valentina. And what I mean by that is she's ranked 5th in the division right now, but everyone's like, okay, you're next. Why? Because, well, everybody else has faced Valentina and they've lost. So whether or not she believes she's ready, I think it's important to really kind of take a look at what would be your next step if it's not Valentina. You know, are you gonna face, you know, someone like Talia Santos? Are you gonna like a Lauren Murphy? Like, who's it gonna be? That's gonna be your next opponent. That's really going to be a fight that you can really shine in if you're not gonna do that, right? So I think that that's kind of like her trump card right now. So she could go out and headline another event. I do like that idea, like another fight night at the Apex or whatever. But you have to go out there and look great and really convince people that, yeah, I can go out there and fight Valentina right now. Because if you fight Valentina right now after a 25-minute decision where, yeah, you looked great showing off your boxing skills, but your opponent also landed a fair number of shots on you as well, got a couple of takedowns. It wasn't the most convincing performance, although it was very good. I enjoyed the performance, but it doesn't have a lot of replay value, if you get what I mean, right? So I think she could hold on to the fact that, you know, enter that next fight, come out with a win and be like, all right, Valentina, let's go. Because Valentina's not exactly rushing to get back in the ring either, you know, because again, like, who's she going to fight? She's pretty much knocked off everybody. So if Alexa can go into her next fight with that being a talking point for sure of being like, yeah, this is a #1 contender fight for her. If she gets this win, no matter who she fights against, it could be a big thing. And it's all about how she kind of navigates these waters right now, because she does have that thing and be like, hey, I'm the next person up that hasn't fought the champ yet. And it's a dominant champion. So you really do have to make sure that you're ready. And I don't think she necessarily has to rush herself into that title shot.
Matt, Me Diamond was saying here in the chat, is anyone ever really going to be ready, though, for Valentina Shevchenko?
Exactly.
Do you want to pass the opportunity? If they do give her the call, you know, you answer the red phone and they say, are you ready to hop on a plane and fight Shevchenko? Do you pass that up?
I mean, it's hard. It's hard to pass it up because, I mean, it's a championship opportunity, right? But again, she is such a dominant champion where, like I said, you're really hungry for a contender. So if you're that #1 person in line and you don't feel you're ready, I mean, that's kind of fine. We've seen that before when you have a dominant champion, right? We've seen that contender that everybody wanted to kind of go ahead and slide in there. We've seen it before. They say, you know what, I'm not quite ready yet. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. I like that honesty. I mean, if you were talking about a career defining moment here, because if you fail against that dominant champion in Valentina Shevchenko, if you fail in that one shot that you're going to get, are you going to get it again? Especially while she's on top. So
before we go to goes, Nolan, did you want to chime in? Sorry.
No, I was going to say, I mean, just listening to everything that Matt's saying, like, I think now's the time for the Amanda Nunes fight again. It sounds like, from what I'm hearing, that the UFC doesn't want to do the immediate rematch with Juliana. So if that's the case, I think that the Valentina Nunes fight, like, let these contenders figure themselves out. Let them have a front runner. Let Alexa Grasso, go out there, win one more time, and really solidify that she isn't as much of a reach as we think she is.
Wow, that's
just
a whole new element you just threw in there. Shevchenko versus Nunes. You really boggled my mind. But fellas, how about this? Sorry, Goes, we have you on deck circle here. We'll get to you in a second.
Oh,
but
Goes
fellas,
is still here?
I think Grasso's actually had more fights in the division than Santos did, and Santos almost pulled it off. And that would have been life-changing if one of the other judges said, you know what, it was Santos over Shevchenko. She'd have the title right now. She'd get the pay-per-view points. So I don't know. And plus, remember, guys, if Santos fights Shevchenko next, all right, and I'm hearing that no surgery is going to be needed on the broken orbital bone. So let's just say that fight is going to happen. What if there's a scenario where that Santos wins, they have a trilogy. Now you're backing up Grasso even more. Manon Fiorot could have a great fight against Caitlin Chookagian. The UFC might go Viva la France and go back there, and all of a sudden you start getting pushed to the wayside. You may regret this decision.
I don't think so. I think the point isn't to fight Valentina Shevchenko. The point is to win the belt. And who's to say Valentina's even the champion when that comes around? If she's got to face Santos again, that was a close fight. This is the first time that we've seen Valentina Shevchenko look a little human, right? So if I'm Alexa Grasso, I kind of agree with these guys. I think you kind of hang back. I'll put it in a way that Alexa can understand. Alexa, pause, play it safe, chill a little bit. You don't have to rush into this fight. You got time. You're a young fighter. She's still getting better from fight to fight, guys. She's improving. Valentina is no joke. But like I mentioned, guys, she's starting to slow down a little bit. You never know what's going to happen. Like Nolan said, with the Amanda Nunes fight, she says she's only got a couple fights left in her. And how do we let her get away without having them fight again? So yeah, maybe it does delay Alexa a little bit, but I think the reward might be there, guys, especially if you can get that fight in Mexico. Can you imagine how big that is? I know the pandemic kind of did a number on Mexico and events there, but we're getting closer to that. And I think that could be a huge fight in Mexico for Alexa Grasso. So I would say pause for a little bit.
All right, we better move on because if Ghost cracks that joke again, we have an Alexa in the room, so we better move on here. All right, topic 4. Continuing with the recent fight night, things didn't go exactly smooth leading up to the event. So fight night 212. Flyweight contender Askar Askarov missed weight, and his fight versus Brandon Royval was canceled. This was Askarov's second miss, and if you'll recall, a few weeks ago, bantamweight contender keyword, Aspen Ladd, she was out of the promotion after her third miss. So should Askarov maybe forfeit his standing as a flyweight contender, getting near the top, right? Or move up to that stacked bantamweight division, my favorite. What do you think, guys? Move up or roll the dice, tighten up your weight cutting game, and stay at 125? Matt, we're back to you.
Well, I'll kind of spare everyone my long tirade on weight cutting again. But my thing is, if you sign the contract to make a certain weight, you better show up and make the weight. I don't like the idea, again, of fights just being canceled because guys either are attempting to cut too much weight and they show up and they're nowhere close or whatever have you, and they end up hospitalizing themselves for a scale before they get into a cage to fight another human being. Listen, this is the most ridiculous thing in this sport right now is failing to make weight. And I think that if you do it a number of times, like, yeah, you got to make a change, whether it be, you recognizing that yourself or the powers that be saying, hey, you got to move up now. You're costing us and you're costing your opponents opportunities here by them not being able to compete. So there needs to be stricter punishment from it. And if it's, hey, you're either moving up or you're leaving the organization, like you got to give these guys an ultimatum at some point. You can't just keep saying like, hey, okay, this went wrong this week. Well, in the second times it happened, something else went wrong. Like, no, you either can make the weight and do it in a healthy manner or you can't. So for me, I think it's time to move up. I know he has other things going on, like where he's had injuries and stuff like that in the past that have caused him to pull out of fights. But if you cannot step on that scale at your contracted weight in a healthy manner, it's time to move up. Stop playing these games of thinking that being the bigger man is always the advantage, because fighting wins fights, not weight.
All right, Goes, where are you on this? You feeling Matt move up to 35, or should he pick up the phone and call Dolce?
You got to move on up, my friend. It's time. I mean, look, not only did he miss and compromise a payday for himself, he took away from Brandon Royval, right? He compromised a big fight on a small card. Don't forget, guys, these smaller cards that have half of the card people we don't even know. That was a fight that I was really looking forward to. It helped sell me to have it on the UFC versus college football that was completely killing it with their schedule this weekend.
Shout out to Tennessee.
I know. And you want me to turn away from Tennessee, Alabama to go to the UFC, you got to give me something that matters, something that makes sense in the division. That went away, and I'm sure his bosses weren't too happy about that. I'm sure Brandon Royval wasn't happy about putting in a full camp for someone that just can't show up. It's just time to go, man. If this were to happen, like if it weren't back to back, if it were a little bit spread out, maybe you can make some kind of a case. The only thing that I think would save him at this point is, like you said, Mike Dolce's in my camp now. I'm moving close to the PI. I'm going to figure this out. Something along those lines maybe could save him. but you also have to battle with what happened with Aspen Ladd, right? How can you tell one fighter, hey, it's your job to make weight. If you can't make weight, you can't be here. And then tell another one, nah, it's good for you, player. You can't do that, right? You got to be the same across the board. So if it were up to me, I'd say, yeah, it's time to move on up.
All right, Nolan, you're next. Finish up here, and guess what? I'll give you an extra minute if you can give me a couple bars of Rocky Top.
Well, I got to go with these guys here. I think that looking at this, like, if you make a mistake, if you have a miscalculation, if you're early on in your career and you're trying to figure things out, I think there's a lot of slack that can be given here. But I think if you are considering yourself one of the best in the world at your weight class, which Askar Askarov is, you consider yourself a contender, you're kind of maybe within one fight of a title shot when you step in there pretty consistently, and you miss weight multiple times. The last time that he made championship weight was in 2019. So he's always needed the extra pound. Some of those weight cuts, even when he made it, didn't look too kind for him. I think that you essentially, it's kind of 2 strikes, you're out with me. When you're a contender, you miss weight. Like, again, everybody has whatever, medical things, whatever. But for me, yeah, I mean, do I feel comfortable say he goes in there, makes weight next time at flyweight, beats a top contender, puts himself in a title fight position? Do I feel comfortable that he'll make weight that next time? Probably not. Not as comfortable as I should. So I think it's time to move up. I don't know him. I don't know, again, you know, if he doesn't seem like somebody that would necessarily would be a total discipline issue. Like Matt said, I think it speaks to a bigger issue, weight cutting. But for me, I'm not going to be comfortable with him in a title fight within the next 2 or 3 fights if you know, with all these weight misses.
Man, look, I'm not part of the panel. I'm the host, but I think I would try and tighten up my game at 125, because the road to 135, Askarov would have to go 5-0 just to probably get a whiff at the title shot against killers. Right now, I think if he can dial it in, he's right there, guys. He's about a fight or 2 away from possibly fighting for the world title. It might be a roll of the dice because, like Matt said, it's health, could cost you your job. It's a lot at stake, but man, 135 is just deep.
He would have done it by now. He would have done it by now. We all knew what was on the line, and he didn't do it. So, I mean, if he's not going to take it serious, then how can the UFC take it serious?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, there's so many. I think from the outsider's perspective, we look at a lot of these guys and like they're pro athletes and they're fighting for a living, so they know what they're doing and they're doing everything right. No, that's not the case. Some of these guys, some people that are ranked in the UFC don't even have proper training schedules sometimes. Like there's guys that just don't train during camp as much as they should. So who knows what his situation is? Like if he's the only one that can know. If he's been super diligent, he has a nutritionist, his body's just changing, then obviously like move up. But if there's things that can be done, I know like a lot of these fighters have figured it out with the Performance Institute to their credit and have at least made their, again, it's kind of I don't know, it sounds counterproductive here, but have had a healthier weight cut, like then more power to them. But I just think if you can continue to beat your head against the wall and mess up, then how can we think that you're working to fix that problem?
But Jonathan Martinez, Song Yadong, Adrian Yanez, just getting into the castle, that gate, man, that security force before you even get to take the knee and ask Sterling for a shot. Wow. I mean, yeah, you know what? We should have done this before so Askarov could see it and react to what I'm saying and then not have that second miss, because he's 0-2 at the plate and 3 strikes and you're out. We've seen it. But anyway, we'll touch more on this on another occasion. Topic 5 here. Here we are, guys, on October 17th, the SBC era live. So we're less than 2 months away from UFC 282 in December here in Las Vegas. And there's chatter of Jon Jones returning to headline the card. Ariel Helwani reported that the UFC and Jones's team, quote unquote, have been in dialogue about him headlining the pay-per-view. It seems the likely opponent would be former UFC heavyweight champion Stipe Music, also known as Stipe Miocic. We've been down this road before. Are you taking this possible matchup seriously? What do you make of it? Goes, take it away.
Taking it seriously? No. To be honest, I'm having a hard time taking Stipe serious these days. Where is he? Does he care anymore? We never hear from him. This is a big fight with Jon Jones, and it's also a big opportunity to collect a huge payday. I don't want somebody to just show up and collect a check. I want to know that this dude's still passionate about the sport. He's arguably one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, but where has he been? I want to know that he's all in on this type of matchup. And I just don't know where he's at. And then Jon Jones, guys, we're going on 3 years since the last time that guy fought. Matt, you didn't even work for the site 3 years ago. George, you had black in your goatee, and Nolan, you rooted for good teams back then. I was 20 pounds lighter. 3 years is a long time, let alone to go up a weight class, come in and fight one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. I don't know that that's going to happen. And look at the UFC stance. 3 years without Jon Jones. Are they losing money? Have they gone away? No, the ball's still rolling through a pandemic, no less. That's crazy to me. So Jon Jones, get your act together. Get in there, fight whoever, knock their block off, because that's what you do, and start making your money. But it's 3 years is way, way too long. So until I see the ink dry on that contract, I don't want to hear about it.
Wow. Go saw that news story and said, phooey. All right. How about you, Nolan? You felt the same way?
Are you trying to say Bailey Zappi isn't the future, man? Come on. No. I guess here's my thing. Maybe I'm just an idiot, which is quite possible. But I think that George is emphatically nodding his head.
You nailed it there, Nolan. Let's go to Matt now.
No, I think here's the thing. I think a lot of the times when we deal with Jon Jones, the issue seems to be on him. It seems to be, oh, what's he want to do? He's not making up his mind. But it seems like the last few months and even now, like, the issue isn't him. Like, the UFC, Dana White's saying the issue isn't him. They need to figure out what's going on with Francis. They need to figure out what's going on with Stipe. So I'm confident, maybe more than usual, that we'll see a return from Jon sooner rather than later. But I think it's just a matter of the UFC figuring everybody else out. Like, obviously, Francis is still dealing with his injury stuff. Stipe, his wife had a child, I think, like a year ago, which I think delayed this whole thing a little bit, at least his career. But yeah, I mean, if he's still in the mix, like, where is everybody else now that Jon's around? Like, the MMA gods just messing with us. We can't have everything line up. But I think that sounds promising. And I think with Jon seeming like he's on okay terms with the UFC and Dana also indicating that, that's the biggest hurdle. So we have other hurdles here, but the biggest one seems to be, for now, take that with a grain of salt, is overcome.
Yeah. Well, if you guys recall, I think they were going to do it in August. Stipe said I'd be ready in September, and then we forgot about all that. And here we go, maybe revisiting for December. How about Matt? Matt, how are you feeling about this, man? Could this happen? Or like Go said, phooey?
No, I mean, it very well could happen. But I think one of the larger points that I kind of touched on earlier in the show today was that these like names that we're mentioning, Jon Jones, Stipe, Francis Ngannou, even these are guys that are in control of their careers more than most others in UFC, right? They understand their worth. They understand their place and where they are in their careers. So they're not going to be forced into a spot that they don't want to be in, right? And I think that's really admirable. And some people, some fans are going to think, oh, that's BS. Get in there and fight, blah, 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 show up. Like, no, these are the guys that understand what's really happening. They understand how they should be controlling things on their end. They are the fighter. They are the one that gets in there. They are the ones that understand their ideal scenarios, so to speak, right? So if Jon does return, I'm all for it. Who's he going to fight? If he fights Stipe, cool. But at the end of the day, the UFC kind of pigeonholed themselves into this position where you've waited so long, whether it be because of the UFC doing it or because of Jon doing it, whatever. It's been so long now that Jon making his UFC debut in the heavyweight division has to be against one of these top guys, because if he goes out there and fails, then that's probably the last time we see Jon Jones, right? So it's come in, make a big splash against one of the biggest names in the division, or you go away, bow out gracefully or ungracefully, so to speak, right? So it's either show up, beat a former champion, one of the GOATs, and then go for the title, or it's over, or it's an experiment that we've been waiting, 2-3 years for now? Yeah. So, I mean, it's got to be something big. There's no point for Jon showing up and fighting someone top 5 to top 10 at this point. It's got to be the former champ, current champ, or nothing at all at this point.
I appreciate one of the GOATs wanting to go up for champ status. I just feel like he misplayed his hand. It's been a lot slower than what it could have been. He could have already been a champ by now, but wow. I for one hope to see Miocic versus Jones here in December at UFC 282. All right, SBC allows us to go just a little bit more. I got one more. UFC 280 is too hot, fellas, for us to not finish there. And quick plug, Goes and I will be hosting a watch-along for UFC 280 on Saturday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Come to MMA Junkie And while you're at it, subscribe to this channel, YouTube channel that you're seeing us on. Like and subscribe, like they like to say, like those YouTubers like to say. I'm telling you, you will not be let down. We have lots of content. But on Saturday, Goz and I will be doing our watch along here on MMA Junkie. Again, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. I know that's not the standard time you watch pay-per-views. They're in Abu Dhabi, so it's going to be live in prime time for them. We got to make the adjustment. 9 a.m. here on the West Coast, noon Eastern on the East Coast. 4 prelims and 5 on the pay-per-view. So here we go. The card's deep. I can't wait for it. Saturday morning, I'm in, right? We gave a lot of love to Oliveira versus Makhachev, Sterling versus Dillashaw, and Jan versus Sugar Sean. We could probably do another hour on each one of them if we wanted to, but we're going to leave those to the side. Guys, I need you to tell me about a fight that hasn't been discussed before that has you fired up. This card's deep. Don't disappoint. Nolan, you're up first.
Easiest question you've asked me all day. Bilal Muhammad versus Sean Brady. I mean, 2 guys that allegedly nobody wanted to fight, that it wasn't a big enough name, that was a huge threat, you know, kind of the risk reward thing. Contenders weren't signed up to fight them. So what does the UFC do? They pair them up together. I think it's a great fight. I think, honestly, it's when this was announced, I was like, oh, shoo-in for the main card, right? Like, this is a great fight. Obviously, this card is really deep and pretty stacked in the top 6 or 7 fights. So it's on the prelims, which, I mean, talk about bang for your buck there. Great fight. I think it elevates whoever wins into the point of, like, now they're contender where nobody else can kind of try to take a different sort of route around them to the title, or think that they're above them, or whatever the reasons that these guys have struggled to find fights may have been. I think it's a great matchup. I think for both of them, it really is going to show what they're made of. I think Sean Brady, especially, like, this is your time to really take a step up and fight one of the big boys. And for Bilal, who's proven to be a difficult matchup for everybody, win or lose, here's his chance to really solidify where he is and push himself into a main event against another top welterweight somewhere at the beginning of next year.
I heard it's such a tough matchup that even Bilal Muhammad had to think about it before circling his own name on Bully's picks. Matt, how about you, man? What's your fight?
Oh man, I'm going with a prospect sort of pick here, and it's mainly because of one side of it. I'm a big fan of Cal Bohayo. Hopefully I pronounced his name properly. I just love everything about that dude. I mean, he's a fun fighter to watch, and his personality is amazing. Every time he gets on the mic, he's super energetic. He understands that aspect of the game that some fighters don't quite get. So whether or not if he's finished people or not yet so far in the UFC, I think he understands how to promote himself, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do against Muradov. I think that's going to be a fun fight. It may not be a stoppage, it may be a decision, but either way, I think if it goes the distance, it'll be a fun 15 minutes.
I'm in. All right, and Goz, how about you? What's your fight?
Alexander Volkanovski and Beneil Dariush versus Dana White. When one of them finds out that they weren't actually the one that was supposed to be teed up for that main event, what the hell's going on there? How can that not be cleared up, guys? That's like the most insane thing ever. But if I had to pick one, Beneil Dariush and Gamrot. I think that fight's going to be fireworks, and it's a important fight in the sense that if you're Beneil Dariush and you get a win here, you better be Clubber Lang in Rocky 3 and sit front row waiting for that main event to finish, dart into that cage and get in somebody's face, because that's what it's going to take to get a title fight at this point. That fight's going to be fireworks.
Yeah, all solid. And can I go?
Sure.
Joe.
How about Gordon versus Muradov? Hopefully I'm saying his name correctly, from Manchester. Oh, no. Yeah, he's from Manchester, I believe.
Makhachev.
Makhachev, sorry, yeah. That is an excellent fight, and he can talk a good game, and you know, we had him on the show, so he's a Dagestani fighter who speaks good English, promotes himself, has confidence, has swag. I love that matchup. I love the flyweight, so that would be my personal matchup. Good stuff, fellas. All right. With that, we got to end here. SBC Live Era is underway. We're going to be here every Monday at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. And as you can see, you can participate during the show with us as we're giving our takes. Fired up about to do it next week. Thank you so much for your support over the last few years doing SBC. I'm happy that we can take it live and go a little bit longer. Of course, a big shout out to the dynamic duo. Today, it's cold coffee on the 1s and 2s. Thank you to all the chatters, everybody that participated. The panel was great. I, of course, took it to another level. Let's be honest here. And, folks, don't forget, UFC 280 is on Saturday. Goz and I are going to be hosting a watch-along. Check it out at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. We'll be back on Monday, live, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, to talk about it all here on Spinning Back Clique.